Hi, my name is Sean Pessarra, resident of Conway. We live just down the street from the library, actually. This is our garden. I wanted to kind of give an overview of the system that we've set up. My day-to-day job is a farm manager at Heifer Ranch out in Perryville, Arkansas for Heifer USA. And I do farmer trainings. I run our 5-acre market garden that's certified organic. And then at home, I kind of have the area I can kind of play around. We got 2 little boys and wanted a garden for them to be able to pick stuff fresh, to play around. We have chickens that they can go and collect the eggs and have some chores and responsibility. We have flowers that my wife likes to make little bouquets with, and we also just give them to neighbors, especially during this time of COVID, where we have a lot of older couples that we know in our neighborhood and we were spending time with, and now that we've been kind of isolated, we can just drop off flowers and squash and tomatoes. It's just a way to stay in touch. So yeah, I'll kind of give an overview of the whole garden, and then we'll kind of go section by section. We have really like 3 sections that I'm using right now. I do want to keep expanding down there to a 4th and a 5th, but we have our chickens, I guess, in zone 1, and that's our like mobile chicken coop. Our greenhouse is zone 2, and then our flowers are an outside garden is zone 3. So the way this works is really a 3-year rotation. So the chickens are not only producing eggs for us, but they're also our main composter. So you can kind of see there's some old soil from some transplants that didn't work out and some old squash plants. So when I put the old squash plants, the chickens immediately look for all the squash bugs on there and clean them off, and then they start tilling in those squash plants into the ground, and putting all my lawn clippings or any mulch I might find from a neighbor tearing down a tree, I can just throw so much organic matter in there, and they just turn it into the soil and feed the soil, and that feeds the soil for my greenhouse, which is year 2. So next year I'm going to slide this chicken coop out and put it where the flowers were, and move my high tunnel to where the chickens were. So I'm trying to really reduce my inputs. I'm not bringing in compost, I'm not bringing in soil. I don't really do raised beds, I just grow right at ground level. And then where the tomatoes and things were, that will, there's still enough leftover nutrition in the soil to feed our flowers and our squash, beans, things like that. And so yeah, so that's kind of our system as a whole, and this is our 2nd year to have our garden here. So last year we just had a few rows, and then over the winter I fenced in the area and put in the chickens into that fenced in area where these 3 zones are, and probably added like a foot worth of leaves that I just got from the neighborhood, and just let the chickens just work that and shred it and work that into the soil. And now you can see it's pretty much soil, but it's a lot more organic matter than was initially there.
Where'd you get your chickens at?
I think just like Facebook. They're all probably 3 years, 4 years old now, and so we probably need to get a fresh batch, get some chicks. Just finding folks that they might be moving, and I got a hen for sale, $10, and I just kind of slowly put a flock together. And yeah, we're getting 3 or 4 eggs a day still, which is pretty good. And then for them to be feeding the soil for us, doing some pest control, and basically providing the nutrition for the tomato plants for next year is really our main uses. And usually in the evenings I'll let them out to graze in the yard, and then at night they all go back in, and then I just shut the door. So get them some fresh grass.
Yeah, and your grass is looking lush.
Yeah,
nice.
It's looking really good.
I'm sure they add a little bit of something to it.
Yeah, I think so. So these are the laying hens, and this is our mobile coop. These are our Mindful Honey mobile coops. Mindful Honey is a business that my wife and I started in Houston, Texas about 7 or 8 years ago, before we moved here to Arkansas. And primarily we do beekeeping, and we've just kind of been branching out from there. So we do certified naturally grown honey and honeycomb, and then we've added elderberry syrup, and now we're adding ferments and these coops that we're making, as well as consulting for homesteaders and things like that. So the coop it's actually on these kind of skids, and so one person can pull this whole thing forward, And so they could get to fresh grass every day, especially if you're going to do, you know, broilers or something like that, and you had some acreage. I have like laying box, so the eggs roll. It's a pretty nice little box I got off at Amazon. The eggs roll forward to that little container so they don't get all nasty. The feeder is like a trindle feeder. They step on it, and the weight of the hen is what opens it up so they can get to it. And that's been really helpful because, especially when we were in Houston and even when we first moved here, we were having like rat issues. Just from having the feed, or you know, wild birds were stealing some of that feed. And so just having it where, you know, we got this feeder, it was maybe $60, which really isn't a lot. It holds half a bag of feed, so like 20, at least, what would that be, 15 pounds of feed or something like that. So it holds a lot. And since that, we've had no like rat and mice issues. Because all the greenhouse we do and the chicken coop are mobile, we use these ground screws, so they're just driven in with a drill, and just goes right in. So these, you know, 4 of these on a tunnel, it's not going anywhere. And then to move it, you just bzz, 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 and it can scoot it forward, or like what we'll do is move, you know, that over to the flowers and move the coop over here. In our other, I think in the future we'll just take the plastic all the way down. They seem to get enough ventilation because it's not super long. There's enough cross ventilation through here. Yeah, it does. It solves a lot of issues. Keeps our eggs clean. You know, we can move them to fresh grass if we want to. Protected from predators. You know, and because, you know, having that big feeder, and I usually have a 5-gallon water with like little nipple drinkers in there. Then we can go out of town and the chickens are fine. The eggs roll to the front where they can't step on them, so we can go out of town for the weekend and not have to worry about the chickens. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, and behind you, since we're over here, since we are beekeepers, they're out in the country right now. I don't have any in the backyard, but this is a swarm trap that I've designed. So I've caught 2 swarms in this year.
Okay.
There's a little piece of old honeycomb up there, and then I spray the inside with a artificial queen pheromone, so it smells like bees have lived there previously. And this little metal collar, I just slide that down, and it's just a flower pot, pulp pot, and that slides down, and then I can just shake the bees off.
Wow.
I've got a video on my Instagram of them moving into it. It's pretty cool. It looks like a cartoon, like giant cloud, you know, bees moving as one, and then just whoop,
what is your
inside.
Instagram?
At mindful_honey.
Okay.
And so all my videos, you can see the swarm moving in there, and me being a big geek about it. It's like, oh, it's so cool. And making the eggs, making the compost, feeding the soil, and then healthy soil makes for healthy plants. So this is kind of fun because I, you know, farm professionally. I'm doing it all day, and get home after a long day. I don't want to spend a lot of time in the garden. So that's, you know, landscape fabric takes down a lot of the weeds. The chickens deal with a lot of the weeds for the subsequent years. We really haven't done any hand weeding in our garden all year. Just from the chickens getting the weeds, using drip inside the tunnel. And so I'm trying to do, you know, as easy of gardening as I can. And so really, Melanie and the kids are the main gardeners of this space. But for varieties, I got to pick, you know, some fun things that I don't grow at the ranch. At the ranch, I'm really going for output and yield, and, you know, things that trying to find right varieties that other farmers can use to make a living and you know, make a profitable farm. These varieties would not be that. These are heirlooms that are more for like color and taste, and are fantastic, but they don't yield like a more commercial variety would. But it's fun to grow them here in the garden, and it's still more than enough tomatoes that we can use. We put a lot away for winter. I got all these tomatoes at the Bell Urban Farm plant sale from Whispering Willow Farms. The seeds are from Baker Creek, and so these are all different types of cherries. Pink Bumblebee was, I think, this one. But just really pretty colors. And yeah, so yeah, it's just fun to grow them. One of these is, I think, Berry's Crazy Cherry or something like that. The fruit clusters on these are just insane. I mean, there's hundreds of fruits on a single cluster. Most of these, I did a lot of hard pruning early on, and then now I'm just kind of letting them go wild. And then periodically I'll just come through and kind of just real fast with like the loppers, just cut all the tops off and just let them kind of keep bushing out. The tunnel is going to do a number of things. One, being able to grow in the winter is amazing. It could be snow on the ground and come in here and it's 70 degrees and there's lettuce and greens and radishes and carrots. So it's great for the winter, but in the summertime too, it provides an advantage. It can get hot in here, but with the shade cloth on top of the plastic, it cuts down the UV by about 30%. So our tomatoes aren't getting sun scald. It's going to, it never rains in here. It's basically an irrigated desert. When they're out in the weather, they're going to get the humidity and the dew. The rain is going to splash soil-borne bacteria onto the leaves. They're going to get blights and things like that. When they're in the tunnel, they're just, it's an ideal condition that they get the heat they need. They're getting all the water they need directly to their roots instead of on their foliage. And so they just really perform well. And when they're not stressed, you have less, disease pressure, less pest pressure. So I haven't really had aphid problems. We have had a lot of caterpillars this year. Dipel is what I use. It's OMRI approved. OMRI is the nonprofit certifying board for organic compliant chemicals, or not, like pesticides or fertilizers, things like that. And so it's a bacterium that messes with the gut of soft-bodied insects. And it's what I use on the squash and cucumbers as well. Stimulants from like Japanese knotweed that can help kind of activate the immune system of your plants. Diatomaceous earth or kaolin clay can be deterrents for beetles and things like that, especially cucumber beetles. We had this whole stretch over here was cucumbers. So it was about 18 feet, or I think I did 18 plants. So I did a plant per foot, and just let them climb up to here. When they reach the top of this, I just cut them off and let them keep vining out. And we got 25 gallons worth of cucumbers off this little stretch. Wow. And so we started just fermenting them by the bucket. We got a lot of cucumbers, and good disease resistance. And then this time of year, they just tend to play out. So we pulled them. I have beans that we'll plant here in a week or two, and then once the beans are out, we'll plant our spinach and lettuce and arugula and kale and things like that. So we should get 4 or 5 crops out of this bed per year, with the tunnel to provide additional heat or protection from disease and things like that. These both start off at a base price of $2,000, and that includes really like all that you'd see here with the shade cloth. There's a removable door. So the way that, to save on some of the price of the larger, more professional greenhouses that have roll-up sides or drop curtains, this one is just more manual because it's for a backyard. You don't kind of need all those bells and whistles. So the plastic goes all the way to the ends, and then you vent it through the end walls. So early spring, you start opening the door, let the excess heat out. Start getting to early summer, you take the door off. Midsummer, you can just pull this plastic back or just take off the end walls. And that's provided plenty enough heat, getting rid of the excess heat, and enough ventilation. So yeah, and then you can get add-ons. So for the coops, if you wanted to do laying hens and nest boxes, we could include that. For the greenhouse, if I've designed drop-down tables that actually like hang up from the ceilings on a hinge. So if you wanted to grow, what we have here, you just pull those tables up and clip them to this top rail. And then when you're ready for early spring, you could still have lettuce on the ground underneath your table. Drop the table down and start your tomatoes. And then when the lettuce is done, you pull up the table and plant your tomatoes. So, greenhouses are high value real estate, and so you really want to get the most out of it. So being able to put things on top of each other. One of the things I've started doing at the ranch is intercropping our tomatoes. So when we put our tomatoes in, we'll plant green onions or lettuce at the same time at the base of the plant. So by the time the tomatoes are big enough to start shading them out, the lettuce and the green onions and things are ready to harvest. We're from South Texas, and so I had to get some tomatillo so we can make salsa. These are red ember peppers. I got these from Johnny Seeds. These are really fantastic. They're a little bit hotter than a jalapeno. but the plants are really healthy, really vigorous, and we're actually fermenting these. We're grinding them up and then making a fermented chili paste, and then using that as kind of like an inoculant, almost like a sourdough starter, to ferment ketchup and sriracha sauce and things like that. So, yeah, wild tomatillos. I don't know what they're doing, and some eggplants, zucchini that I probably shouldn't have put in here because it's out of control. And what's wild too is to see how much bigger it is than the zucchini that grew outside. This is purple, I think purple opal basil, and we haven't really been cooking a lot with this. It almost looks like Thai basil. It may be Thai basil. I found the seeds in a drawer at the ranch from years ago, and this is the only one I got to grow. But we've been using it as filler in the bouquets, so you can eat it, and it's a good. It has these really pretty long flowers, purple flowers. Oh, yeah. And then just the colors are really pretty, big, like a very open growth habit. And so we mix that in with the flowers over here. We have a few different varieties here. Zinnias are always a good, summer go-to favorite that everyone loves. They look great, even if they're just by themselves in a vase. This is Gumprina, this little pink and white one. There's a pink and purple variety. I think there's another pink variety over there. You typically just get it in a mix, and it just, what you get, you get. And this is a cool one too, because you can dry it and just hang it upside down. It'll dry. It'll keep all of its color, and then you can use that like in the wintertime to make little bouquets or wreaths or something like that. These are Oklahoma ivory, just a really great flower that goes with any kind of color scheme. And then all these are Queen's Lime series zinnias. So they have like a green and orange, a pink and orange, a red and orange, and I think more of the Oklahoma ivory. And I think I got this one at the plant sale too. I don't even remember what it's called. It might be the cactus series or something like that, but they're huge. They're really big flowers. And then on this side, these are all celosia. So this is in the spinach family, like amaranth family. And it's a really good filler because it has, you can keep a lot of the greenery at the top, but it matches a lot of the color scheme of the zinnias. And then it just has different habits. Some of them, like this one, will branch out a little bit more. And the great thing about both of these is I don't really replant these at all summer. So I'll put these in late April, and we'll get flowers until almost the first frost. They just keep cranking. The more you cut them, the more they bloom. So as long as they have good, fertilization early on, then they should be good to go. We do. This is just electrical conduit. And then we just use these strings in kind of what's called a Florida weave method, or a way of, most people stake tomatoes. This is how I stake flowers and things like that. And I just kind of wrap the string around and then go in between and then wrap it around. And then when I come back, I just do the opposite pattern, and that keeps the flowers from falling over, because they will fall over if they don't get some support. And
you mentioned fertilizing these. What would you start out fertilizing in your soil?
I think the first thing I always recommend to people, both as a friend and as a professional, is to just get a soil test because they're free. Yeah. The state offers them for free, and that'll give you a great baseline. I pay extra to get the plant available nitrogen and the carbon. So that might be, I think the nitrogen might be $15, maybe $30 at the most, and then the carbon might be maybe about the same, or organic matter. And so it gives you kind of a baseline, especially if you're starting a new garden. How much organic matter is in the soil when you start, and then how much carbon basically are you sequestering into your garden with organic practices. And so at the ranch, we started off with about 1% in some of our gardens, and are now at like 3.5, 4. And so we've quadrupled our organic matter in our soils in just a couple of years. Wow. So we're hoping to do the same thing that here. And that organic matter is going to hold water. It's going to make the plants healthier, which means they resist disease and pests. So most soils are going to have, in Arkansas, has old soils. It has histosols, really weathered red, gray soils. And so you might have the minerals you need, but you're probably not going to have the nitrogen you need. And so one of the main nitrogen fertilizers I use is feather meal, because there's chicken pellets, but sometimes that can be too high in phosphorus. And so just doing the feather meal, it's 15% nitrogen, which is high, but it's a really slow breakdown because it's proteins from the feathers and things like that. So you're not going to burn your plants. You almost can't overdo it. It's just going to really slowly break down and release nitrogen over a long time. So that's a really great one. Yeah, and then kind of like a little tip or trick that I use. I was talking about doing the trellising, and I kind of did the same thing the way I weaved the tomatoes to keep those from falling over. Is I just keep this little Ziploc out here. So I got my string, scissors for pruning, and then even these little tomato clips, which was kind of what I first started off doing, was doing some hard pruning on the tomatoes, and then I just started weaving them. So that the main stalk is on this main string, and then all the little side shoots are held up by a weaving action. But I just like keeping stuff where I know exactly where it is. I don't have to hunt for things. And then we're probably going to replace these with flowers for the fall, maybe some straw flowers. But these are summer squash. They're pretty much play out. I mean, you can see the disease pressure is getting high. But these are some long summer squash.
Wow. Oh my God.
That's crazy. We started to almost kind of lose them at the beginning of the season. From vine borers. And what I did is I took that dipel that I mentioned earlier, the BT, and made a slurry with it, and then injected it into the stem with a little medicine dropper. Our kids, not for our kids, but just one we had extra for that purpose. Yeah. And yeah, just injected it right into the stem so that dipel would kind of move along the stem of the plant, run down the stem, and it killed the worms that were already in the plant, and they haven't come back. I think I'm just going to do that every year now, just preventatively. Do that at the start of the season, because that worked really well. What brought us to Arkansas was getting a job with Heifer International, so doing consulting, technical assistance with them, and I've been gardening for probably 10 years. I actually just found one of my notebooks from like my first garden, so it was 10 years ago. And then we've had the beekeeping business about 8 years. And before I got into working for Heifer, I was a field ecologist, so I did habitat restoration, environmental permitting, plant biology, things like that. And then was, that coupled with running my own business, set me up for, I think, success as a farmer to see it from an ecological standpoint.
Are there opportunities maybe for somebody that's listening or watching about what's going on at Heifer for kind of like in that role that you were at of wanting to get more into maybe a profession as a farmer? There's several opportunities right now. There are opportunities to volunteer on a more committed basis. So we have residential volunteers at the ranch. They live on site. They work alongside either me in the horticulture department or our livestock team and do day-to-day chores. If someone's really interested in wanting to get into farming, but maybe not ready to just make that leap on your own, it's a good way to learn under somebody and get that experience. And you can volunteer. We actually have job openings for farm hands, so it's more of an hourly kind of as needed basis. We're going to catch chickens tonight, or we got a fence row we got to take out. And so if someone's looking for part-time work, that might be an opportunity for someone. All right, Sean, thank you for having us out. Beautiful systems you got going here. And you said you're going to donate these to the pantry.
Yeah, I'll donate those to the library pantry. And we've been supplying that one, and then the one over there by Chick-fil-A too. It's great to have the garden and just keep the abundance flowing to the community.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sean. We'll see you next time.
I'll see you, Zach.